Thank you very much for your introduction. I would like to take this opportunity and thank Friedrich Ebert Foundation for over 20 years of very important partnership and assistance for building democracy in Georgia, for building research capacity in Georgia, for various scholarships for Georgian students and scholars. We are deeply grateful for your activity in Georgia, and it is wonderful, and it is a great honor for me to be here. I would like to speak about, focus on some important aspects of present Georgian life. Our commitment to the vision of a Europe free and united is very strong at a point in time when this vision is seriously put to the test. And Georgia's choice to pursue European Euro-Atlantic path is irreversible, and Georgia's history is European. And so shall Georgia's future be. According to a recent poll done by National Democratic Institute from the United States, more than 80% of Georgian citizens share both vision and the way we decided to go, even though Georgian people had to make severe sacrifices and are aware that they, for probably quite some time, will have to make sacrifices as a side effect of a tribute to our own joint choice. It's been a long way since Georgia accredited to the Council of Europe in 1999. For the nation till then, this achievement has been the probably most important sign of acknowledgement and of valuing and honoring altogether our historical roots, our self-determination, and Georgia's true European citizenship. This year, as we celebrate 25th anniversary of Georgia regaining its independence, we are proud about what has been achieved. Though we are aware there are still some steps to be done, and Georgia, from the country torn by civil war, has been transformed into a democratic, modern, and dynamic state. After a decade of transition, we find ourselves in the phase of consolidation in various fields, politically, socially, and economically. Let me just throw a spotlight on some core pillars of the huge package of reforms set into place over the course of the past decade, and particularly during the last 4 years. We may later, then in the discussion, deepen and more differentiate what I am packing in bullet points right now. First is judiciary. A significant lack of independent judiciary had been one of the biggest challenges to the country and Georgian citizens when this government was elected to power in 2012. Accordingly, expectations had been high. What has been done and achieved so far is that police forces consequently have been depoliticized. A prosecution has been set into place investigating according to international high standards and going after offenders without regards to social classes or political ties. Same can be said about the justice system, not any longer to be arm-twisted, the plea bargaining system, serving justice, not power, or impact in whichever field. Finally, a penitentiary system that is not an instrument of revenge and social terror. It was said just minutes ago that Georgia has gone through democratic elections in 2012, and yes, this was a huge achievement of Georgian people, and of course it resulted in a change of power. But I would say that democratic elections were held in presidential elections and local elections following the parliamentary elections of 2012, and unfortunately not all standards of free and fair elections were shown during the pre-election period in 2012, and we had enormous pressure over business and members of our society And of course, this stays in the past, and we are committed to show great progress during the October elections of this year. On human rights area, human rights as a term means a wide span of tasks for our government, especially in a country coming from decades in boundaries and just developing its self-understanding as a free and democratic society. Painful lacks of human rights, having become obvious under the previous government, had been another clear reason for the people to go and vote for an alternative in autumn 2012. Accordingly, expectations had been high that human rights were not only given but also guaranteed by protection through a new government, its representatives and the bodies in place. We have outlawed discrimination on the basis of color, cultural background, national identity, religious affiliation, and sexual orientation. And as part of our Visa Liberalization Action Plan, we passed, Government of Georgia approved, and then Parliament passed anti-discrimination law and important mechanisms against any kind of discrimination is in place. We have established the fundamentals of a state in which minorities have their right to live their culture, religion, and language while being free and safe and enjoying all social, educational, and professional opportunities. We are committed to actively build a society where women are not only protected but thrive. Since 2015, civic organizations can file cases on behalf of victimized women. Georgia has signed the Istanbul Convention and set in place a national action plan for Security Council Resolution 1325. Our committed philosophy behind all this is clear words says, in clear words says, you cannot outlaw intolerance, but you can make it unacceptable. The achieved level of freedom and democracy of a state can be judged by the level of freedom given to media. We firmly believe in the right of unhindered journalistic investigation, free speech and writing, and generally in journalism and media as the informal but crucial fourth pillar of any democracy, next to legislative, executive, and judicative power. Reporters Without Borders rated Georgia in 2015 as a leader in Eastern Europe. Freedom House confirms Georgia's exemplary progress made and standards set with respect to free media as a driving part in a young democracy. And when it comes to freedom in and on the internet, Georgia is at par with Britain and France. Since 2012, Georgia has created one of the most liberal digital broadcasting regimes in the world. Cable TV providers have to guarantee media pluralism, must carry and must offer alternative voices. The European Commission, the OSCE, the World Bank, Transparency International, Eastern Partnership Civic Forum agree on the thing. To express yourself in Georgia is safe, and the opportunity to do so is guaranteed by true media pluralism. Now on elections, the commitment to freedom of expression will particularly be crucial this year due to upcoming parliamentary elections in October. Since 2012, Georgia has delivered free and fair elections in the entire political playing field, from local to presidential. Both government and citizen eagerly anticipate PASE monitoring this year, as we all wish to make the elections in 2016 the most transparent, fair and level playing field the country has held to date. I personally invite you to be there when we celebrate the results of these elections. Whatever the result may be, it shall first and foremost be a win for democracy. Of course, we have our own forecast for these elections. Now, this is in a nutshell, and by putting just a spotlight on some fields of key importance, showing how this Georgia turned from past to present, mostly due to the reforms set in place within the past 4 years. However, Manifolded are the challenges ahead of us, and unquestioned as priority will be the aim of long-term sustainable development and inclusive growth for Georgian citizens. Therefore, the government of Georgia has adopted a four-point reform agenda. Firstly, economic development reforms, which include further lightening of existing tax burdens. Secondly, education system reform, targeting to maximize quality of teaching in secondary schools and higher and also professional education oriented on bridging the gap between profession supply and demand. And I should proudly say that several hours ago, our Minister of Education signed a memorandum of cooperation with the Ministry of Education of Germany on partnership under the German dual professional education model for Georgia, which I believe will lay a ground for very good cooperation and will directly benefit to decreasing unemployment in Georgia. And thirdly, infrastructure service development to build east-west and south-north corridors, and our aim is to utilize Georgia's potential as Silk Road country between Europe and Asia, as well as its massive touristic potential. I had an opportunity to discuss this issue with Chancellor Merkel during our meeting this afternoon after her visit to China, how important is to bring cross-border, to advance cross-border cooperation along the Silk Road, and Georgia can play an important role in this very important project as a connector country between Europe and Asia. And fourthly, open governance. Among others, our plan is to further increase the involvement of the private sector in legislative process, also to further improve and modernize public service provision. Yet we have introduced single window principle for all government services. Ladies and gentlemen, what I have given you is a glimpse of what has been done by the Georgian government and what is being supported, strongly supported by the vast majority of all Georgians. There's a lot more to be mentioned, as I haven't spoken about the developments in the wider field of economy with, for example, more than 300 German companies holding subsidiaries, investing and doing business in our country, but I believe the potential is much higher. I haven't talked about the efforts in the field of education, particularly on improvements in the field of professional education, and we can speak an hour about the opportunities, especially in this field, since we still produce unemployed people with our education system, having a huge gap between the demand of the labor market and professions supplied by the higher education system in Georgia. So we need to bridge this gap through this cooperation with German Ministry of Education and also with different NGOs in Germany. And last but not least, I haven't mentioned Georgia's commitment to a closer and deeper partnership with NATO, to whose increasingly ambitious tasks Georgia is already contributing quite substantially. As you may or may not be aware, Georgia will, with actually nearly 900 soldiers stationed in Afghanistan, is contributing with the second biggest force after the United States to NATO's resolute support mission in that region. We are trying to create more stability in Georgia following peaceful regional policy within our immediate neighborhood. And here I should mention that Georgia, since regaining its independence in 1991, has established close and solid relationships, even friendship, to each and every of its neighbors. Also, since this government came into place in autumn 2012, Georgia is determined in putting ongoing substantial efforts targeting to normalize its relationship with Russia as much as possible, given the still strained situation regarding the occupied territories. Already in the very first days of this government, in November 2012, then being Prime Minister Kvirikashvili appointed one of the most experienced and acknowledged diplomats, former Georgian ambassador to Russia, Mr. Zurab Abashidze as special envoy for relations with Russia and asked him to establish regular bilateral consultations independently from the so-called Geneva International Discussions format held to address the consequences of the conflict in 2008. Again, I can assure you our interest always was and still is a quite different one. The interest of the Georgian government is to at least achieve an atmosphere that allows factual meetings and to the purpose conversations about the conflict, which unfortunately in the years between 2008 and 12 was heated up for several times and always then with severe consequences for the people who already suffered enough. However, this engagement has never meant and will not mean any of Georgia's clear objectives to be put on stake. Georgia's territorial integrity is not negotiable. Though we are seeking to break the deadlock in Russo-Georgian relations by pursuing pragmatic policies. And through these policies, including steps to restore relations in trade, transport, humanitarian and other fields, we insist Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region, South Ossetia, being a part of Georgia. We are highly concerned about the continued deprivation of the local population of fundamental human rights. We are concerned about Moscow-backed security forces taking more and more territory under control by moving the border fence, dividing villages, by installing barbed wires, cutting farmers off the land that fed them, kidnapping locals to blackmail their poor families and make them paying a ransom, or as just these days, shooting a person for absolutely no reason to death in the daytime at a frequented bridge and border control station, thus amidst dozens of other people and in front of running observation cameras. However, so far without consequences for the murderer himself, what makes the incident even more a damnable and cynical one. And of course, in closing, I would like to say that this is actually by nutshell putting just a spotlight on some fields of key importance, showing how this Georgia turned from past to present, and again showing Georgia's commitment to pursue consistently, patiently, by the way, European path and Euro-Atlantic path, and pursuing very ambitious reform agenda we have in place. I look very much forward to go into more details during my following conversation with Mr. Carsten Voigt and in the discussion with you, and if you have even more specific questions, I will be glad to answer these questions, and I would encourage you to address also questions to the members of our delegation, ministers, Minister of Education, Minister of Interior, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and also well-known diplomats in Georgia, Mr. Tedo Abashidze, who used to be Security Council Secretary, and now he chairs the Foreign Economic Relations Committee in the Parliament of Georgia. I would like to thank you very much. I would like to thank Friedrich Ebert Foundation again for its very strong commitment to helping Georgia in this very important and challenging path to Europeanize Georgia, to build institutional democracy in Georgia, and government of Georgia's commitment to follow this path is stronger than ever. Thank you very much for your attention.